we going to embrace? To do that, we need to understand. So in a few steps, I'm going to tell you what it entails, what it encompasses, and what are the different ways of adapting, because our role of teachers is changing right now. What we need to do is to adapt to the needs of our learners. So first of all, my goal is to make you more familiar with various learner profiles in the classroom and present different nature of specific learning differences. Now, we don't say anymore that they are disorders or difficulties. In fact, what makes it difficult is the lack of adaptations or support or interventions. So the term neurodiversity, first of all, acknowledges the fact that our brains process information differently. So more about it in a second. But I hope that you'll be able to adapt to those needs when it comes to the language of delivery, instruction, and I will show you some practical ideas with photos as well, what works, and of course, AI-powered tools. So without further ado, how much do you know about neurodiversity? And what cognitive or behavioral learner profiles have you heard of? Please use the chat. And the third question very quickly, are you aware that you're working with neurodivergent individuals right now? I'm checking quickly. Okay, brilliant. Someone says not yet ADHD. Okay, dyscalculia. You can use the chat or have a quick look. Brilliant. I will be checking as we go. Please add more comments. So before starting planning, uh, the idea of being neuroaffirming is that the acceptance is all around. It should be a whole school approach. And it's not just us teachers, it's the community, it's families, and everybody around. There might be teachers just maybe after some initial training, which is great, and it's great to see more specialist training going on. But these ones, like ADHD, autism, yeah, or finding the balance, someone says, or again, about different, yeah, abilities, there is some awareness already. Let's get it straight. When we're talking about neurodiversity, as in nature, biodiversity, it is the idea that people do experience and interact with the world around in many different ways. The typical term means neuro as interacting, but there's neurodivergence, which is the slightly different to the mainstream idea, neurotypical learners. And about the processing and approach, when we go further, we discover that a lot has to do with emotions as well. And now, when we're in class, let's imagine how that translates into the environment in the classroom. An example, some students with ADHD may excel with interactive or hands-on lessons. Others with autism may benefit from visuals or more structured routines. But recognizing and supporting these variations is fundamental. So let me show you different learner profiles. As in the chat box, we've seen ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, which would be more about numbers. There are different kinds of dyslexia. I won't have time to go into details right now, but just to give you the overview, dyspraxia, we can have acquired conditions as well. And when we talk about mental health or well-being, that has to do the majority of cases with anxiety or anger or dealing with processing emotions and perhaps even traumas in the classroom. To make it clearer for you, some example profiles. What do we find here? Well, every child is different. Every learner might present a different scope of these things, such as meltdown, stimming, which is a soothing response, anxiety, which I mentioned, the need for routines, maybe some social issues. That's very important because emotions may block us in proper interactions with others. There's also the problem of double empathy, which I'm going to explain. So, very briefly, we need to observe our learners. We need to know who we're dealing with. Sometimes it's good to have the diagnosis already or the report. However, the waiting line for diagnosis is quite long. So, there are cases that you may not be aware of working with neurodivergent learners. And sometimes as a teacher, you may blame that maybe for being, and we have there, inattentive, hyperactive, or impulsive. But it's part of who they are, who the learners are. For example, the ADHD. So far, we need to know our learners. We need to understand that there are different learners depending on the age. And depending on the interest, we can do so much more. Now, with supports such as sensory stimulation or introducing organizers, using some apps for time management, and helping in the lesson to structure activities for, let's say, more collaboration, project learning, which in turn will help to um, be more integrated. Now, this is very important to avoid its stigma or labels that this person is autistic. I will tell you more about the neuroaffirming language in a moment. That is very important too. So, reframing. Another step is understanding the double empathy. As a teacher, you may be neurotypical. You may know of the learners in the classroom, but still, it's very important to adopt every single time. Um, there's the theory of diversity in social intelligence that you may have heard of, and even monotropism. So, in the classroom, seeing some extraordinary behaviors, I say especially in a good way, may lead us to even working later on with gifted learners. So there's so much more about emotions, about specific interests of our learners as well, and how they interact with others. We need to use different strategies, different options, different activities, and it's a process. Let me explain a little bit about dyslexia, which is quite popular, and what can be done, because now I'm going to some ideas. I'll show you one more time. So with writing or spelling or reading or the phonemic awareness, sequencing, memory difficulties, there is a lot going on in the mind of a dyslexic learner. What we can do as teachers is use different fonts, different sizing, different backgrounds, contrast, and different colors when it comes to presenting information. These are the basics. Let's go further. Thinking inclusion, I mean personalized learning, and here with assistive technology. Tech-friendly classrooms. So from step number one, realizing what we can do, what the needs are, then how we can support our learners. I will show you in a second some apps that I'm using and those that are available there, and I'm recommending for note-taking, perhaps for grammar or generating images, videos, and creating different activities as we go. This is important because some teachers think, oh, but I have neurodivergent learners, and they can be, again, dyscalculic, dyspraxic, yeah, dyslexic, a whole mix, plus those emotional problems. And you might say, I'm stuck. That's oh my gosh, that's too much. How can I prepare properly? Well, there we go. These apps can help you create a toolkit, and I have chosen some of those. Now, AI is here and it's here to stay. The classroom is one of the learning environments, and we should be using and showing, being role models, and accepting that, yes, this is how the lesson is going to be, and encouraging using that at home as well for a better experience. Now, let's have a look. Text to speech or speech to text. Not only for homework, but typing in the classroom should be allowed, or presentations, posters, projects. So Canva, Gamma, creating even short videos in the classroom and comparing perhaps the activities in the group. Critical and analytical thinking skills are also embedded in that process. We can use those drawings in the classroom and animate them. Lots of games and lots of presentations. Why? Because as I mentioned before, visuals and some structures or patterns are recommended. Electronic copies of textbooks are also very good. So basically, please do not rely on just one source. Multimodal learning. I recommend these that you can see right now. So digital notes, documents, audio recordings, converting text, checking grammar as you go, everything in one place. Now, one of the conditions quite often associated with processing skills is time management, organization, and mind maps can help. So encouraging extra tools as we go in the class and outside of the classroom. It's all about finding strengths, and this approach calls for a perspective shift. So if you want to be more adaptive, let's work with other teachers. Let's talk to the principal and highlight and celebrate diverse skills. So it's nurturing social skills as well, creativity and resilience. I will mention in a moment cases such as traumas, and being not able to process those emotions, masking happens, plus the double empathy problem that learners are trying to just pretend or pose that everything is okay, be learning or those social interactions that I mentioned. So what we should encourage is also compassion and empathy. Now, did you know chunking is great? So that's my idea for educators as chunking. Dyslexic thinking is officially a noun. This is a fantastic approach. So we're embracing that already. When we observe learners, we can find out that there are special conditions. Sometimes you may not be able to even describe your emotions. There are extraordinary skills as well found in neurodivergent learners, such as hyperlexia, so the ability to read at the early age. Also, stimming. It's a natural self-soothing reaction. And talking about behaviors in the classroom, very important. Observe your learners, talk to them about body language, about natural responses. It's so important to self-regulate first, and I will give you activities for the beginning of the lesson or even throughout. A very interesting bit is that sometimes stimulation of one sense can activate another one. So I work with learners, I work with gifted ones, but also with those that taste some words or numbers. That's just amazing. And just a short mention on giftedness. Why is it there? Well, whenever we need to adjust or adopt or change the curriculum a little bit to help the learner to achieve the potential, this is called neurodivergence. It's not the neurotypical way of processing or learning. Okay, so what are the considerations going further? A holistic approach to education, a therapeutic one, so some strategies that can help them to reduce the anxiety level, to avoid the amygdala hijack, so-called, that you're scared, you're too scared, you cannot function properly, not to mention using other things, maybe interacting, calculating, analyzing, sitting on a task. That's not happening. Embracing the inner child as a therapist, I talk a lot about it. And the double empathy problem. Sometimes we expect someone to behave this way or spend this much time on the activity. As teachers, as we give a range of tasks where we're focusing more on the process rather than the result or the timing, it brings better effects. So removing the cognitive overload, allowing appropriate processing time. And it's important to know there are sensory seekers and sensory avoiders in one classroom. Hence, we should be very careful as teachers when creating the environment, um, careful about triggers, or we should remove any distraction. Appropriate stimulation, number one. Again, the double empathy problem explained. You will see those slides later as well. I'm highlighting some points. A holistic approach means mind, body, and spirit. So the spirit needs movement, okay? Needs engagement, needs proper stimulation, enhancing focus and concentration through a variety of techniques. I never say one technique works. For some learners, as we saw, it can be a structure and they would love that. For others, the interaction, the social part is very important. For others, it's just the beginning of the lesson that matters most. Self-regulation. We as teachers play such a role on even making this a norm that neurodivergence is a thing and you're embracing this right away with your language. I do a lot of reframing and I educate everyone on that. So if you want to be neuroaffirming, it's okay. A person with autism, an example. How does that sound? Sounds like an illness. I have even learners thinking, I have dyslexia. What is it? How can I cure it? We're not fixing, we're not curing anyone. We're supporting them, and we are adapting ourselves as teachers. That's our responsibility, I believe, to know that it's not a learning disability. We're talking about strengths, different abilities, and we're discovering that and encouraging. So what we should be doing, I focus on the left side, you can see the right one, it's an autistic individual. We're embracing that. It's someone can say, that is who I am. I'm not with something. Or a learning difference, challenges and needs, supports, accommodations. With monotropism, I have learners of different kinds. So it's like hyper focus, one channeling. A person can spend a lot of time on perhaps maybe building something or creating models, anything, could be art, depending on the interest, but we cannot say obsessed. Okay. So another thing is co-occurring conditions or coexisting ones. For example, dyslexia and ADHD or dyspraxia and autism. Every day I work with different learner profiles, every single one, and every child is different. So there should be another webinar on that. However, so far we've sat on the importance of acknowledging the fact, on focusing on strengths, and it should be full approach. If you're working in a state school or in a private one, again, there should be principles and the proper framework. What we can see there, inclusion of all students, well-being is the central part, leadership and management, proper organization, and students are active agents in their learning. And through the use of different, as I said earlier, applications and different supports in the classroom and outside, that can be done more effectively. With collaboration, proper reflection, fostering appropriate behavior, and making that aware that it is okay to have a mental break. It is okay to maybe display some self-serving behaviors. It's totally fine. I will show you some photos in a moment. How we do that. Well, I teach mainly in the UK, or Ireland, or also in the MENA region, but it's like depending on the class, depending on your age group, depending on your students' needs. So one training session is not enough. However, adaptive learning, if someone says, is it happening in your school? Well, are there proper adaptations being made to teaching? And are you providing those opportunities to meet expectations? Okay. And they can be different depending on those profiles. The universal design for learning is recommended. We can hear more and more about it, which is great. So, representation, different formats, engagement, motivation, different choices, incorporating real world examples. I support and I would recommend everyone international projects. I do that a lot if someone is interested. So engaging learners, showing them how they can present their views, their experiences, go out there and you'll be recognized even in other schools, sharing knowledge. Everyone has something important to say, do, and show their interest. Very important. Fostering a sense of autonomy, not always telling our learners what should be done. So projects are just perfect. Different expressions, so demonstrating understanding through different means. I think that's quite clear. Also, differentiated instruction, flexible grouping, so adjusting the seating as well, and adjusting the pace. Now we're going to the core, and I will have some photos. I'm going to present some ideas like that. Sensory rooms, is it possible to do things like that in your school? Quiet spaces with soft seating. Now, multisensory equipment. Please remember, we have sensory seekers or sensory avoiders, so we need both. We need a room where a child can come, a child or a student even, and sit down. We have now libraries adjusted to that, and some classrooms too. Lights, floors, walls. How can you use anything that you have around? So the focus now, knowing more about the needs, is inclusion. There we go. Let's see timers. Some ideas here. Visuals and frequent breaks. I do recommend using music and any kind of kinesthetic support there, activity, interactive technology, of course, for dyspraxia and dysgraphia. Any graphomotor skills or neurodevelopmental conditions there would require working with hands a lot to strengthen the muscles. Again, movement. What I'm trying to say is we should balance our approach and allow both handwriting activities that will, like here, hands-on, okay? You're focusing on the task, but with appropriate breaks and timing. Then we can use assistive technology and ask even our learners modeling how they can put this like a drawing or maybe Play-Doh or creating a little thing. And you may say, but is it just for learners? Absolutely not, because a minute or two of such an activity enhances creativity and then it can be used with AI later on. Personalized, right? Graphic organizers, very important. Checklist, especially for minds that prefer routine, like the autistic learner would like to know exactly what is happening step by step. You may even allow a different journal on a side or using walls, as I said before, and going around the class and changing the seating, making sure that everything is done properly. Charts, as you can see. Okay, let's go further. Multisensory equipment from fidget tools. I have lots of them, even here around in any workshop, any class, they are just there. I mentioned movement and sitting arrangements, color coding, schedules, folders, and we're going to emotions next. I mentioned mindfulness as observation, self-regulation. There's a great activity. There we go. Body scan. I will show that perhaps in a moment. But how can you start the lesson well? This is the question. Okay. Number two, being brain friendly. So chunking. It's better to do a few shorter activities than one long task, including metacognition. What is it? Basically explaining where does the information go? How does your brain work? Can you remember it better? What is happening? Can you remember it right now, or do you need to write it down? Speaking, explaining the process step by step for especially autistic learners, but not only. Um, Multisensory, of course, and therapeutic. So soothing. If you want, then play some music. No problem with that. Different textures. No problem with that in my classroom. They can stand up. And every minute counts. Learners, as I mentioned, can have journals, or I encourage mindful breathing and mental breaks as well. What we see is just the surface, right? But everything happens underneath. Here are some ideas. Sensory seekers, yeah, would love those lights. Using a projector or water tubes, be it indoors, four walls, or outside, whenever libraries being around, just pressing, touching sensory seekers. This is the activity about body scan. It does involve sitting comfortably, grounding, very important now for both, I would say, autistic and the ADHDs, or you can have both. Um, so finding your grounding, nobody has to know. Learners have, so many options. They can breathe, close their eyes, and that's normal. The position, how the body feels, mind, body, and spirit. You can see the procedure right away. I will explain more about those cards. There are fantastic resources right now. So stress reduction, um, those cards are for teenagers, for students, and for adults, or feel-good cards, so-called, with some quotes, positive messages, affirmations. I do it a lot, and the beauty of it is that learners can do them themselves, and using, of course, AI or some flashcards and so on. So memory improvement, but talking about something positive. Trust me, 2, 3 minutes sometimes in the classroom can make such a difference. Uh, Even encouraging, praising someone. You're introducing a learning strategy or the approach at the beginning of the lesson. You have that mindfulness, breathing exercise. And then in the middle of the lesson, you ask them to say some positive things about the other person. What was the lesson like? Or who you loved working with, and things like that. And of course, changing sitting and allowing a lot of interaction with other learners. Timing activities work really well, what I noticed. And instead of asking students to just put their hands up, you're going around and they can just show sometimes some signs, or a lot of nonverbal communication. Using colors, different tricks, music as well, as I said, and fidgets while doing an activity while on task. Visualization, yes, because sometimes it's really hard for some neurodivergent learners to actually sequence things and imagine what is happening. So step by step, breaking it down, and memory improvement techniques as well. From 4 here, cards, maybe 8, 10, using storytelling, different textures that I mentioned earlier, games, lots of visuals changing. So a series of short activities rather than one long. That's my favorite, perhaps, because I love animals. And guys, if you're using that in your schools too, animal therapy in schools to reduce that anxiety or anger. Okay, fidgets again and other things. International projects available, going always the extra mile. as a teacher, being with your students, being for them, and things are done by them as well. Okay, then you don't have to worry about motivation. But if they know, my teachers sometimes, I heard from learners, you're the first teacher that is actually saying those things, and I always thought that I was like not normal. Sometimes the self-talk is terrible, masking, coping mechanisms, uh, found in learners. When you start a conversation about that, that it's totally fine, and you start being neuro-affirming, they will come to you and they will appreciate it. So raising awareness when it comes to other educators, but also parents and the community. Because if our learners see that outside, and think about it, if they think I'm normal, I'm okay, I'm accepted, I belong, that's all they need. They will engage, they'll be motivated, they'll be better people. Yes, and better workers. There are great benefits about neurodivergence as well, such skills as hyper focus, for example, or checking things, routine. So different jobs are actually recommended. And as a fact, here in my area, I can find fantastic neurodivergent individuals uh, being great at their jobs because of those special needs. Organizing festivals everywhere, so lifelong learning. And this session would not be, enough to talk about everything, but self-regulation number one, then using AI tools, inviting your learners to create their own activities, and step by step, introducing adaptations. My question to you right now is, what adaptations can you make to create a more inclusive classroom environment? How? So create an action plan, and when. So what do you need to be more neuro-affirming? There's a list of further reading. I'll be open to questions, just showing you that. And I will show a QR code in a moment. I'm available on LinkedIn. First, your questions. I cannot wait.